This video will describe the production of 2 solid wood eggs with Celtic ring inserts. Very similar to this egg I made several years ago. For this project I've selected 2 pieces of cherry, 3.5 inches square by about 6 inches long. And I'll be cutting slots in here using the Celtic Ring Jig on the Accu-Slice system. I've laid out 2 unique patterns for this project, each different, and I'll be using either maple and Accu-Slice woods inserts in these slots that we're going to cut in these blocks. For the cutting of the slots in the wood blocks for the Celtic rings, I'll be using a Timberwolf bandsaw blade, 10 teeth per inch by 1/2 inch wide, rake tooth design. I made a test cut and a test sample of wood and measured the width of the kerf left by the bandsaw blade in the wood sample. I verified the width of this kerf to be about 50,000ths of an inch thick using a set of feeler gauges. Therefore, the thickness of the wood inserts that will be fitted into the cut slots must be between 46,000ths and 50,000 inch thick to assure a good tight fit to the kerf slots in the wood blocks. If the fit's too tight, the wood slice will not seat to the bottom of the slot in the wood. If it's too small, there'll be gaps in the glue joints. The accuracy of cutting these thin wood inserts can easily be accomplished utilizing the Accu-Slice bandsaw accessory, as described in some of our other videos on the Accu-Slice system. I'll be using both maple and Accu-Slice wood to make these wood inserts. The wood blanks are initially 3.5 inches wide by 12 to 18 inches long. They will later be cut to the exact length needed for the actual wood insert pieces. After making an initial cut to square the surface of the wood pieces, the indexer is advanced 50,000ths of an inch to allow for the thickness of the bandsaw blade, and then advanced an additional 50,000ths of an inch for the wood inserts themselves. After cutting, the only sanding that is required of these wood inserts is to sand the edges of the wood inserts with 220 grit sandpaper to remove any fuzzies or splinters of wood on the edges of the cut wood pieces. In the previous video I described the design and manufacture of this Celtic Ring Jig. However, since that video I made a few changes. The first change I made is I changed the dimensions on the table slightly. I cut 2 inches off the front and 1 inch off the back of the table, just to reduce the size and weight of the table. Next I added some springs underneath these clamps, just to make them easier to pop off your work when you're changing it. The third change I made is I added 2 sets of clamps on this rail to clamp my wood in place and hold it nice and snugly so it doesn't move in either direction. Okay, I'm setting up the Celtic Ring Jig, and the first thing I did is I set my angle to 60 degrees. That's the angle I'm going to use for this project. And next I set my stop so I don't cut the whole way through my board. And I have it set to 100 thousandths. And when I take that stop out, it's right on. Next thing I did, I made 2 angle blocks here to kind of hold my wood a little bit better. It's a pretty big block of wood. And I'm starting my first cut down about 1 inch from the top, and I'll work my way down progressively as I add additional slices to this project. I have 2 clamps here, and I'm going to clamp those on both sides of my path of my blade. So push it against this stop, against the fence, tight down, and lock that one in place, and I'll do the same here. And then we're ready to do our first cut. Begin by first sanding the slots to make sure there's no sawdust left in there, and also on the back edge making sure there's no fuzzy on the edge of the cut. Then I've cut 2 pieces of maple, 50,000ths inch thick, and you always do a dry fit. If it doesn't fit dry, it won't fit when it's glued. So there's one, and there's two. And what I did on all these is just make sure there's no fuzzies on the edge. And it should be a nice tight fit. And then we're ready to glue. Utilizing a scrap piece of the wood insert, coat both sides of the wood insert with some glue, and then insert this into the kerf of the wood block, and just spread it around and get that glue coating the inside of that kerf. The purpose is just to get some glue on that cross grain of the wood, because the cross grain tends to absorb the glue pretty readily, and you want to get a little bit of glue in there just to get a better glue joint. And then spread glue on both sides of the wood insert. Spread it around thoroughly that it totally coats both surfaces of the insert, and then slide this into the kerf in the wood block. You can open up the block a little bit by just pulling on the two surfaces, but be careful not to pull too much or you might actually break the joint at the bottom. So you insert the piece thoroughly, push it all the way to the bottom, make sure it's thoroughly seated, and you can wipe off the excess glue. And I usually apply at least 2 clamps to the top surface to get a good tight joint and allow it to dry for at least half an hour. And then repeat this process for the other block and also the other 4 sides of the wood block after the kerfs are all cut. So the clamp's been removed. Now I'm just going to sand these inserts flat so I can go on to the next step. What I did do is label these 1, 2, 3, 4, the 4 sides, and I put this one against the fence for the first cut, so now I'm going to put 2 against the fence for the next cut. And again, we repeat the process. That's the first 4 rings in these 2 blocks. Now I'm ready to do a second set of rings, and these rings will be a 1/4 inch spacing on both these blocks for the next set. So again, I'll just repeat the process, doing 4 more rings. So this space is right where it was. What I have here now is a 1/4 inch aluminum spacer, which will move the angles up, or the rings up 1/4 of an inch. So to put this in here, position 1, and now these rings will be up here 1/4 inch higher. And what I can do now is get rid of the spacer and just move this up so it's all set now. We now have 2 sets of rings on all 4 sides on both of these blocks of cherry. And now is where the pattern is going to change. In this one I'm going to skip, instead of having 1/4 inch spacing, I'm going to go to a 1/2 inch spacing. In this one I'll continue with a 1/4 inch spacing. I'm also going to change the color of the wood from my maple white to black Accu-Slice and give it a little different contrast. So the next thing we'll do is change the spacing and cut the next set of lines. Okay, this stop is just where it was in the previous run, and so I have 2 spacers here. One is 1/4 inch and one is 1/2 inch. And on the first block I'm going to go with a 1/4 inch spacing. And then the other block I'll go with the 1/2 inch spacing. So we go with the 1/4 inch spacing here. Position 1. I completed the set of Accu-Slice rings on all 4 sides on these 2 pieces. And you can see the difference where there's a smaller spacing between the rings here, and here I actually doubled the spacing to a 1/2 inch. And now I'll do another set of 4 of the Accu-Slice rings. I'm now ready to add a second set of Accu-Slice rings to these 2 blocks. And this was my wider spacing, so to get this next set I'm putting the 1/2 inch spacer back in, plus another 1/4 inch spacer. sure I get the one position. Now since the spacing is different on the second block, I only need to do a 1/2 inch spacer. So I pull out the 1/4 inch and just put a 1/2 inch spacer. And that should be accurate, which it is. That completes the 2 rings of catalogs and 2 rings of maple on these blocks. Now I'll go and add 2 more rings of maple on each of these sides. And you notice the pattern is different, so these will have a different look when they're done. So once again I have to change the spacers. So for this block here with all the rings equal distance, I've added a 1/4 inch and a 1/2 inch spacer. And starting with side 1. This completes the slicing on the Celtic Ring Jig on the Accu-Slice system, and then inserting the various slivers of wood into the slots. Each of these 2 blocks of wood has 24 pieces of wood, 6 on each side, and I alternated between maple and catalogs. In this case I have 2 layers of maple and 2 layers of catalogs, 2 layers of maple, all 1/4 inch separation between the different layers. On this block, again, it's 2 layers of maple, 2 layers of catalogs, 2 layers of maple, but the spacing is a 1/4 inch at the top, then a 1/2 inch, then a 1/4 inch, and then a 1/2 inch, and then a 1/4 inch. You'll give a different pattern when it's turned in the lathe. And you can actually see the difference in pattern in the center here and over here already. One additional thing, since my slices go all the way to the near top of the wood, and I'll be turning this into eggs, I'm going to add some sacrificial blocks to the top of both of these. These will eventually be cut off in the lathe. I'm just putting these on there so that my tailstock bit doesn't leave a mark in the top of my egg. It'll be on this sacrificial piece of wood which I'll cut off. These 2 Celtic Ring eggs are now complete. After they came off the lathe, I gave each of these 2 coats of shellac, followed by 2 coats of wipe-on polyurethane. Each of these eggs contains 24 wood inserts, 6 on each side, 4 being maple and 2 being Cadillacs. Just different patterns and spacings between the two eggs. And that completes these 2 Celtic Ring eggs.